So when I think of branding, what do I think about?
Well, luckily, on that bombshell, what do you think about? I've got you just doing jazz hands, so it means it's working. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending where you are in the world. Welcome to another RCIRCLE Live. I've got the lovely Jim, obviously that's ironic, and the genuinely lovely Elizabeth. Why don't you both say hello?
Hey,
hello.
Hey.
Yeah. Hello, Martin.
Oh God, Jim, this is people are watching this. I mean, let's have another go.
I know. Let's start again. Rewind.
Oh fuck me! Oh God, everybody, I'm really sorry for him. I'm really so sorry. He's going to wake up in a second, and he's.
I'm going to. Yeah. Well, yeah.
There we go. So anybody's watching, it's really good to see. Well, Jim's going to kick in a second, probably, hopefully. Failing that, do you know what? Let's just do that for a second. Right. So now we've got everybody here. We're going to bring our guests on, and Jim's going to come back, and we're going to have a great conversation about brand. And I guess it's about what it is around personal brand, about employer brand, about brand if you're a recruitment agency, difference between branding and marketing. So let's bring our guests in one big swoop, because then it will make it all work wonderfully, and then we'll kick off proper. So let's bring you, and let's bring you, and you, and you, and you. Hello. This is that lovely bit where you bring everybody in, and it goes a bit wrong because it's sort of massive people coming in.
Evening.
Hello, so good to see you. It's funny, it's like, where does the I go?
Cool. So I'm also, because Jim's probably just suffering in silence, let me just bring him back into the room as well. Actually, I don't know how to unvideo him. It's interesting, isn't it? Jim, you can come back in, unvideo yourself, you can do it. Anyway, everybody, how are you all? Are you well?
Awesome. How are you?
I'm pretty good, actually, apart from Jim getting my tits now. But it's like a domestic thing. What we're going to try and do is also get you into gallery view. Then there we go. That's what we want. We want gallery.
Yay.
Jim back in the corner. Wonderful
Here
stuff.
we are.
So, who knows who? So, Jim, you know some people. Elizabeth, you know some people. I know some people. Why don't I introduce the people that I half know? And then Jim, you introduce the people you half know, and Elizabeth, you introduce the people you half know. So Nate, sadly, you're it, and Claire. I'm going to pick Nate and Claire, and then the rest are fair game. So Nate, I know him like he's like a brother that I've never had. We're like this together. We've not recently just spoken to each other for the first time at all. It's like we go way back into my past and his early childhood. Nate, how are you?
Very well.
Good, there you go.
Thank you.
That's okay. Nate, for anybody who doesn't know, and I'm sure you do, is I'm going to use the word employer brand anorak. Do you have anoraks in America? I always wonder about that.
Well, isn't that like a rain jacket?
Yeah, but more geeky and a bit more, sort of nerdy.
Oh.
No.
no, I don't have that thing. How very dare you? Clair Bush, I can see you, Clair Bush. Claire is just lovely. That's what you're known for. You're known for being great at doing things like this, great at doing some marketing things. You've got a lovely new shiny job at an employer brand business where you're doing their marketing. So it's like you can see why she's here, everybody. It's that double whammy of employer brand and doing the marketing for an employer brand company. How are you?
Really branded kind of. In fact, actually, I think I should change my name to Brandon. I sort of can't because I've got a guy called Brandon in my team. So yeah, no, it's great. I love it. I'm loving life right now. I'm having all my Christmases every day. It's very
a marvelous thing.
Love it.
Jim, do you want to introduce the people that you know?
Am I allowed? And can I? I'll be on form now and yeah, kick in a little bit. Sorry, guys, I've just been a bit of a long day here. So. Oh, yeah, Amelia. I'm going to introduce the lovely Amelia, who I've known for many hours, now a few weeks. Amelia, who has a new business as well. Well, sure, we'll hear about this as well on the show this evening. I'm going to introduce Darren Westall, good long friend of mine from Pager as well. I'm sure we'll hear about his technology. And we've got Dan in the background. So before I hand over to Liz, I'm going to bring Dan in the screen here because Dan should be able to drop in, hopefully any second. And there's Dan as well. From Flock, as he's got it branded. Look at that. See who?
You have to unmute yourself. We're old school.
Look at that. So, and now I'll hand over to Liz to introduce some people that she knows.
I love it. I love it. Well, welcome to our table, everybody. I'm excited to introduce Ashley, who is working together with me like a hound dog on our Career Growth Summit and our L&D Cares. Really excited. She is also a newly formed business and Pegasus consultant. Excited to have her here. Woo-hoo-hoo. And then James, I don't recognize it. I don't recognize it. Don't you have like a little figurine that you should be having right next to your shoulder?
You mean my very special figurine of Carl Weathers?
Exactly.
My signed figurine of Carl Weathers. He's just over there. I'll bring him on for an encore later. How's that?
Yeah, he needs one. He really needs one. So if anybody's into 80s music, 80s films, or anything remotely fun, James is your guy.
I also do some marketing stuff as well, apparently.
Oh,
you know what
I mean? Gotcha. Awesome.
Okay. Have we got everybody? No. Who else have we not introduced yet? Ashley. We've introduced Ashley. We've introduced It's everybody. There you go. Good. Well, marvelous. I'm just thinking. We've got some people in the waiting room now. What I don't know about the people in the waiting room is if they're waiting to ask us a question. Might be. So we're going to find out. Of course, some of them are people that you know. So Claire, you're Brandon. What's his second name?
I've only been there 2 months.
It's just Brandon. That's it.
It's just Brandon. You don't know second. Oh, because that's how you are. Because that's you're nice, aren't you? You're very sort of. Hey, I'm Claire. You're Brandon. Hey.
I have actually just announced to both Brandon and Ruben, who work with me over in the US, that they are now forever known as R&B.
Are they? Would that be Ruben Valentine and Brandon Lucarelli?
You know what? As duos go, these guys.
I'm not inviting them in. Then that's okay.
They are the most amazing guys ever. So yeah, it'd be nice to see them. I only spoke to Brandon and Ruben R&B about half an hour ago. So yeah, it'd be kind of fine.
Do you know them well enough and like them well enough for us to bring them in and put them on the spot and get them to ask you a question?
Yeah, I suppose.
There we go. There we go. That was enough.
I love it. Love it.
Might not sack them tomorrow because they're doing too much of a good job. But yeah.
See, well, when they get here, officially, you're not going to get sacked tomorrow. So that's excellent news. nothing like tenure there, is it? The prospect they pop in.
They might not.
This is not working today, is it?
Might not actually come on. I don't know. They are really busy. Brandon.
Oh, they're gonna. Do you know what? Brandon's gone shy because he's taking the video off. Ruben's gone shy because he's taking the video.
We're here.
There we go. There we go. It's a bit unfair because obviously, you know, Claire couldn't remember your surnames, let alone who you were. But the good news for both of you, and it's on video, it's recorded on live on YouTube, it's recorded on our backup as well. You won't get sacked tomorrow, which I think is free reign to do what the hell you want. Do whatever you like tomorrow because you won't get sacked. Anything you've been waiting for, when I get sacked, when I get sacked, shall I do that thing, shan't I do that? Just do it. Go ahead and do it. So this question. So, because I like putting people on the spot, have you got a question for Claire, which might be related to employer branding, might be related to anything else, or might just be related to Claire?
It is called Ask Me Anything.
So I'm going to get you to ask anything. Is there anything you've wanted to know? You've known Claire for a little while now. Is there anything you want to know about Claire that she's just not told you?
Have you read all those books behind you, Claire?
Hey, Brandon.
So the answer is I've not read them because they're CDs and DVDs.
Perfect.
So you heard it here first. Claire can't read, which is great because she's a marketing person. She doesn't need to read. It's all the visual stuff these days, isn't it?
Just me. Valid point. But me.
Same me. Marketing value. And the other question, I said you both got a question each. What you have another question for Claire? I might get rid of you after that. You know that. That's anything I will say.
Glasses are steaming up now because I'm having far too much fun.
No, this is your chance. You're not going to get sacked tomorrow.
You won't get sacked tomorrow.
This is already, it's recorded, it's live. Ask anything.
The thing is, we already talked about like everything about an hour ago, so they probably.
So actually, then, what has Claire told you that we don't know that she told you offline?
Yeah, what are the secrets that we need to know about branding and where you've gotten in terms of new insights from your wonderful Claire?
Ah, yes.
As my eyes stream live.
I mean, Claire is just an absolute wealth of knowledge. You know, we're recent to PH Creative ourselves, but come from a world of employer branding and, you know, just adapting our CEO's methodology on give and get, and just really understanding the value of employer branding and how important it is to stand by your employees right now, as well as, you know, your future candidates in a weird time, but a time of empowerment, a time of change, and just a time of growth and understanding. And just being under Claire's leadership, I've learned so much already. And, you know, it's kind of a new role we've taken on as community managers, and just looking to do a lot more of that.
Love it.
Can't help that. Thank you.
Nice.
It was just lovely, wasn't it? Just like a little PR stuff for you,
that's-
Claire. So that was
That's
bad, horribly.
That is
It was
great.
planned. It
anyway,
was planned. It was
I'm just
planned.
I was going to
trying.
say, Ruben, you have to follow that up now. I mean, you know, it's like the second best man speech, isn't it? Really, you know.
I was going to ask what kind of wine she was drinking.
Oh, well, that's easy because, yeah, it's one of my favorites. I think I might be allergic to it. It's
That's not good, honey.
there you go.
Oh, Fusé? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Fume.
One of my
Nice.
favorites. So this and the Chablis are like the two whites that I go to all the time. Oh, except for if I'm drinking with Alicia, who was my intern last year, we always drink a bottle of wine now. I can't remember the name of.
That's a good wine. That's a good wine.
Neither
Drink
is
so much of it,
Bishop.
probably.
Yeah. We drink antifreeze. We're not massively sure exactly what the make is, but it's very important. Good stuff.
Dan, not a good choice.
Carlsberg Special Brew, but we're not sure exactly the vintage.
I love
No,
it.
that's only
Special
Friday
brew.
nights when I'm hanging out with you.
I love it.
Diamond White. Come on, we all know. That's fine.
I love a
Magdog 2020, if you're a particular age. I don't know how old everyone is. I'm very old. So if you have the Kiwi Magdog 2020, then fair play to you. It wasn't exactly known for its bouquet, but it was highly effective.
20% or something daft, wasn't it? There you go. So I'm guessing and I'm hoping that people have come here to talk about branding. So I'm going to try and segue that neatly into this conversation. Otherwise, it's just us chatting, which is lovely. However, one of you, and because my memory was like a sieve as usual, I think it might have been you, James.
No, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't.
Well, somebody asked about
There you go,
them.
I'll tell
Well,
you
somebody
that.
asked. So this is that awkward icebreaker, which gets everybody actually contributing and saying something. Which is, what's the difference between branding and marketing? Which is a
Yeah,
lovely.
that was me.
You see, I knew it was you. My memory's vague, but it's not
That
that
was
vague.
pretty darn good.
So why don't we do that? Because then that way
Can I have
everyone
my
feels like
whiskey now?
warm and fluffy. You can have a glass of whiskey. I feel sorry for you, Nate, because you know you were. What time's it with you? It's about. It's late afternoon, isn't it? It's not. It's like
Hey.
actually.
It's
Yeah.
it's quarter to noon.
It's not even morning. It's still morning. With you.
Morning, 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Wow.
Think
Yeah.
never should do more American stuff. Another conversation of the day. So branding and marketing, or branding versus marketing. What's the difference? Who wants to go first? You'll get a turn, by the way. Sort of democracy.
I'll go first. I always love talking, so why not? For me, branding is the strategy. It's what drives everything, and marketing are the tools, the tactical things that you get it done. And that's as simply as I believe it to be. Obviously, we can have a very long discussion about it, but if you're asking what is the difference, one is a strategy, one of the tools. And that's how I view stuff, and that's how I execute all my branding.
I love
Everybody
that.
agree,
Amelia.
disagree?
Well,
No, I violently agree, actually.
Oh, violently.
It's nice now.
Yes,
I'm
there's
fully
some
in agreement with everything you
white
said.
words
Oh God, what's
It's
going to
great
happen?
Yeah, it'd been an interesting evening if that had been gone the other
Should
way.
everybody agree? Great. Okay.
Way to put it. American thing. I think what I look at, if I think of like a brand, is it sort of like all encapsulating kind of like the look and the feel and the experience. And that's sort of like the everything, and then marketing is sort of how you bring it alive to tell the story.
Exactly.
You know, so yeah, I like that.
Exactly.
I always go for pretty old school stuff when it comes to branding. It's just probably completely wrong. I'm a very old person, but I didn't used to go around branding cows and things with hot irons. But it always makes me smile that the idea that branding comes from that kind of visceral and very almost painful experience where you brand something, and that always makes me smile because of course branding is a lot more than that nowadays. But I imagine it came from that very thing, didn't it? You branded a piece of life, you know, your cattle or your stock, way before we started branding other things. And I think the most obvious thing is the consumer experience is completely on top of that. You know, the brand is a separate thing. So yeah, marketing is, you know, as you say, it's not the brand itself, it's how you actually take the brand to market. As I always said, I'm a pretty simple man, so I always think marketing is about, you know, how do you take the thing to market? And I think sometimes people get a bit excited about marketing. Marketing is marketing. It's taking it to the right market. And no matter what you've got in way of brand, if you're in the wrong market, then most of the time you can't do anything anyway. But anyway, I'm going to violently not oppose you because I think you're absolutely bang on.
You've got a top tip there. Yeah.
Dan?
I'd love to pick up from Dan, because what you said about marketing is exactly the same thing that my husband's gran said to me once, which was, make sure you dress up really warm when you're on that market stall. My other half had basically explained that I do marketing, and so she was convinced that I sold fruit and veg on a market stall, which
I love it.
So
yeah, I had a chocolate.
She wasn't wrong with Broadbean, was she?
No, she wasn't. Right. I think I probably was there then, Darren, actually. So she probably did get it all well confused, but actually probably right. So yeah, marketing is exactly what I would concur with you both, all of you. Marketing is about the mechanics, the framework. I talk a lot in PH conversations about building the vehicles, and we've already got the sort of wheels on the bus and the design for the bus, which is the brand. But what we've not got yet, and we're building towards it, is the vehicle to take all of our lovely content and our lovely knowledge out to the marketplace and deliver that, and stop off at various stops along the way and get people to come on and share in the experience, which I totally agree with Amelia, is all about the experience as well. Yeah, that's my kind of 2 penneth worth.
For amongst friends, excellent.
But you know, everybody's just interrupting. You do know that creates absolute rubbish viewing, because people go, "Oh, that's lovely. Okay, you're in agreement." It's like this sort of there's no opposing sides of anything. It's like,
James
that's lovely.
about to come in with heavyweight opposition now.
You say that. I'm not expecting that, but let's see we go.
No, he wasn't. He really wasn't. He really wasn't.
I'm still with the top tip, just going brand some animals. That's all I heard.
I always put it that you market your brand, not brand your marketing. Boom.
Good work.
And the irony is, most companies
tweet that.
The irony is, most companies believe that you brand your marketing, not market your brand. So can you just brand this up for me? Can you press the jazz it up button on that thing for me? Like it's the complete opposite way around.
No sequins, no rhinestones.
It's really funny because I talk about, I do lots of this stuff with startups and kind of much smaller businesses, and I used to do it for quite a few years. But I always had the cart and horse moment, you know, talking about the marketing. I'm pretty old school, so I say, you know, you take your product, the farmer grows it, you take your product to the market, and there's a cart and horse little graphic that I use. And so often, isn't it, the big companies get the cart before the horse. You know, they literally get the cart before the horse with this whole thing, and then they blame. They go, "Well, you're a rubbish horse," and it's like, dude, I can't do it if the cart is before the horse. This is a very silly way of doing it. So no, I'm totally with you. Especially with this whole new advent of, I say new, proving how old I am when I say new with social media. I've been training people in it for 15 years or so, but never mind, all 10. So, but yeah, this whole new thing about influence marketing and other stuff. So many times people are getting the cart before the horse because they get too excited about stuff and forget their brand values and other things. But that's a different conversation. So for a different time, well, no, for later on rather than right now.
Yeah, don't peak too soon.
I was going to say that's exactly the conversation.
Yeah, but I didn't want to peak too soon. I think I just did. That was good. I'm out.
And so there we have it. It's 10 to 8, everybody. Now we're off home again. So
I'm glad you didn't, Dan, because normally that's me. I get a little bit out at the start, and that's it. I just go flat the rest of the night. So you beat me to it.
I think we need a whole different drinking game for this. Every time Dan mentions another type of livestock, we all have to take We've got
Yeah.
horses.
I'm here for it, Nash.
What he's not told you, in another
I'm
life
such
he
a
was a
simple
farmer.
man. And the irony being is, I'm so not that person. I'm so not that person. But it's a bit like sheep. It's a bit like herding sheep. And I think, all right, let's go.
All right, herding sheep.
I think people are getting a really common thread between marketing, branding, and drinking at the moment. Really, I think there's a real strong link there.
No,
It's
they're
clear
very
for about
Important,
5
yeah,
years.
thank you.
Perhaps not.
that-
I got it wrong. You know, I'm not in marketing, so I don't know. So
No, it's definitely not. There's no correlation at all between
No.
volunteers and drinking. Just
No,
so
no.
we've got the record strght.
No, absolutely.
Brandon,
And
Ruben, you've heard it here
No
first.
correlation.
We all take another drink.
and those are the things you never pitch when you're drunk as well. That's a very no one. And never come up with great ideas when drunk, and don't regret them the day after. I know it's good. I'm glad we cleared all that up. That's good.
And also, it's not like that whole journey home is the best whiteboard experience you'll ever have.
Or you think it's the best until maybe you actually look at the whiteboard, and then yeah.
And it's the train window that you now need to sort of like.
You take the Post-its from that guy with the beard, his hat, and then you use them on the train for the whiteboard.
On the
I'm glad we've all been there. I'm glad
Yeah.
we've been
On the sleepers too, Liz, definitely.
Yeah. Well, one
Feels
thing.
that one.
So, okay, then when we talk about employer brand, how is it there? Who makes the employer brand? Is it then the branding strategy, or where does it come from? So who actually makes the employer brand?
That's a little bit less funny, this one. I'll get a bit. I could get a little bit.
I challenge you Dan to relate that back to some kind of indigenous Australian animal, like a kookaburra or something.
Lord, that is a challenge. Okay, so
Off you go.
it all started in 1976 when I first encountered the kookaburra. I just nicked that. It's a bit like a kangaroo. It depends with the roo. None of this is really working. We're not talking about indigenous Australian animals at all, but it's a bit like a platypus. Add one more. It's not a herd animal, so it doesn't really work. In all seriousness, with the employee brand stuff, and obviously I'm going to kind of say this kind of stuff because I work for a tech company that kind of goes in this space, not in employee branding space, but actually company culture. So, you know, I truly believe that the employee brand is what employees say about you when you're out the room. And I know that may sound a little bit, a bit harsh, but that is the reality of it. You know, we live in a world now where, you know, not your review system or your Glassdoor or the other stuff. All this is shouted about for eons, well before you come up with a strategy that you need to be more caring. I'm afraid if you think your employee brand is a strategy that can come from on high, that's the biggest problem you've got straight away, because it does not, and it will not. And if you think your company culture is getting a ping pong table and a couple of pictures of kangaroos and dingoes to become Australian, I know it's something. Yeah. Then again, we may have an issue. It's a bit deeper than that, people. It's a bit deeper than that, because it involves people, and most people nowadays shy away from the reality, and they think that they can just push an employee brand out there and people will be fooled by it enough. And we're living in the post-COVID world now, where I believe that there's a new way of marketing, which is going to be to do with transparency and honesty, but more importantly, it's going to be more to do with employee brand than ever before. And it's more to do with values than ever before, because the people you'll be talking to will actually not just be paying lip service to this stuff. They actually will care, and they will take their labor elsewhere, and your company will not exist. And even if you talk to, there's a lovely quote, lovely video shot a few months ago, this American company talking about their human life. They literally talked about it, ironically, because I was talking about livestock before, their human stock capital, and how their human stock capital was moving because of this COVID situation. And I was just like, if anyone's watching you say that, dude, I mean, A, you should have had more media training, and it's terrible employee brand. But more importantly, that's what you think. And if that must filter down, and they must know that you don't care. And they should, none of these people should work for you. And then you wouldn't have a company. So yeah, to answer the question a little bit, you know, the employee brand is actually what your employees say about you to their friends. It's not the fact that they wear a hoodie and they go out and they say they like you and code your stuff.
Yeah. Nice.
There you go. I managed to bring in Australia a bit.
Nate,
yeah, no, I just want to piggyback on that. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, because it's easy to get caught up in the shiny objects of of this industry. We need to create this, we need to create that, we got to, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, if you don't own the employee experience and the candidate experience first, then like none of that shit matters. It's just like, it's pointless, because you could put out like the coolest video or the coolest piece of content, and once a candidate comes in, and if you destroy that experience, and Dan, like I'll even add, employees talk a lot and candidates talk a lot, and a lot of that conversation goes on in back channel conversations that we're not privy to.
Yeah.
We see some stuff on Glassdoor on review sites and things like that, but the amount of like back channel conversations that destroy brands, it's very, very real. And so the thing I always come back to is like this idea of like back to basics. It's like, get that stuff in order first, because the perception of what it's like to work at your company exists regardless of what you do. Employer branding is just an attempt to influence that perception. And like and influence isn't a negative term. It just means it's an attempt to like tell those stories and connect those dots and allow people to like have this like relatable experience. But I just think it like, you have to own that. And if you're sitting at a company and you're thinking about this stuff, and then you look around and go, damn, like there's some disconnect here. Just like stop and fix that stuff first.
I do love the fact you're so polite now that you said disconnect, which I think is brilliant. You know, you can't polish a turd in some respects. I know that's not a very nice or very British saying. Sorry, you have to drink your own champagne. I think that's nice. I don't really know. What I do know from the stuff that we've done at Flock, and one of the biggest reasons that people leave is they don't like the company culture. That's actually one of the top reasons. I mean, we all know on the call, but that's one of the top reasons of people leaving the job. Yeah, they don't like the company culture, and that company culture comes around, you know, not just organically, but most of it's going to be organically. It's getting the right people on the bus. It's getting the right people. It's not just manipulating them to say the right stuff, because as you say, a video is great, but you know, at the end of the day, the mismatch between culture and values at the moment is astounding, which is why in Britain we have such a low productivity rate. You know, it's costing the UK economy about £24 billion pounds a year, because people don't like their jobs and don't like who they work for, but they have to work for someone. And that low productivity won't be able to do that after COVID. I don't think we're going to have a situation where we have to be more productive and people have to become more engaged. And companies that have got values and culture driven people on site who love what they do, they're about 21% more profitable. You know, so you look at something like Apple. Apple is worth, you know, the 100 FTSE. Apple has overtaken 99% of them. You know, it's literally, its worth is more than the rest of the 99 and the FTSE 100. And that's because lots of people who work for Apple love working for Apple. And I think it's not just because they make cool stuff, but actually they have a really integral part of giving their employees a great experience, but also they must probably like the people that work in Apple. I'm not going to comment on what Apple do with their supply line, because I wouldn't touch that with a barge pole. And it's all alleged.
Well, and I think too, when you really start to look at it though, so we're in a war for talent, regardless of where you're at on the globe, regardless of what industry you're in. Talent is the top commodity. Even if you are at Tesla and you're making cars and you're looking at batteries, right? You need the people who can program those algorithms and you need those engineers who can come in and create that new technology. That is the number one thing. So every time I hear things like, oh, well, you know, the threat of automation, there will always be room and space for people who are smart and to create, and for top talent especially. We're seeing it right now with COVID. You have, as somebody who is in hospitality and airlines, and a lot of industries are really being impacted. They're having to furlough tons of workers. And you're seeing the companies that are taking advantage of this. I live just outside of DC, where Amazon is building their second office, their second headquarters, right? And they're looking at this and saying, who is on the bench, who is out there, who we can get and bring in to help us continue innovating and doing these things. And so I think, to piggyback on what Nate and what Dan were saying, is you also though, you know, it's such a huge part of the candidate experience in terms of who you bring in. I think it's also a lot about, you can't have all style and no substance. So I think one of the things you look at is, you can have all this flash and all these really amazing videos and all of these, you know, this awesome hiring process, when things start to fall apart. So if it's not authentic, people are not stupid. They will identify that super, super quickly. You know, you can smell that from the get. I had, a colleague of mine who was interviewing to be one of the diversity and inclusion leads at a top company. And one of the things that they noticed immediately when they went in there was, hey, I'm only talking to a certain type of people, or I'm only speaking to a certain function within the organization. And if I'm going to actually espouse and promote this type of culture, it needs to be across business units. This cannot just be an HR-led thing. It can't sit in HR. It has to be everywhere.
I think you make a really good point there, Ashley. There has to be, I think we can all agree, we have to be back to basics. You know, the candidate experience has to be spot on. The employee experience has to be spot on. You have to actually care about your talent. But ultimately, there has to be championed from every single part of the business. It can't be an HR exercise. It can't be a marketing exercise. It can't be something you decide to do because you need to get more bums on seats. It has to come from bottom to top. It's not something that marketing just goes, oh, everyone else is doing employer branding, we should be doing that as well. It has to come from the employee side first. And then you go, okay, we're going to take these stories to market. We're going to take this incredible culture we've built to market. You don't do the employer branding stuff first and then puts it in. It's like sticking a band or sticking lipstick on a pig. I think someone said that a minute ago. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Another lifestyle.
Yeah.
I can add to that as well. Oh, sorry, Dan, you go. No, sorry, Nate, you go.
It's cool. There's a lot of us here, so it's hard to figure it out. Can I ask a follow-up question just to everybody about this?
Absolutely.
So let's see. I absolutely agree that this has to start. It's like bottom to top, top to bottom, wherever. It has to be outside of us. And what I don't want to happen, and it's easy for this to happen, is for, when I say us, I mean us in this industry, to be in this like agreeable bubble where everything we're saying we just agree with because we get this stuff. It needs to get past that. The question I have is, so because we work with growth stage startups, we see different types of founders. We see founders who are like people first and they just get this stuff from the get and like it's not an issue. Some don't understand that. And when you get to mature orgs, it's completely different. Do you guys feel that if the mindset isn't already there at the top, that it's never going to change? Basically, that if it's like, I don't want to say it's not worth fighting the good fight, but it's going to be hard to change. I don't know the answer to that. That's why I'm like posing it as a question.
I have a whole CV with a history of those that get it and those that don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, kind of like the companies that I've really loved and thrived at, like Broadbean, working alongside Darren, we had a phenomenal culture. And to the point that was raised right at the beginning, which was around the people getting it and the people drive your employer brand. Every person that was hired to be part of the Broadbean family was hired to be part of the Broadbean family. And they accepted everybody that they were kind of walking in and working with. And we kind of accepted them. And it was talent, and it was kind of almost at this whole sort of like, I'm not going to say Brian's book too often, but if I do, then start bingoing me as well. But the give and the get is exactly that philosophy, right? We accepted people for the talent and the value that they could bring, but we also knew that we could add to their personal experience, their learning and development, and the culture would enable them to be their best selves. Obviously, organizations change, organizations grow, and they go through growing pains, you know, and whether that's years and years of development, or if it's kind of fast startup to scale up, and then kind of size of organizations, geography stretches, all of those things. COVID, massive impact on organizations that were really, really tight. And then suddenly everybody's remote and working from home. I'm not sure that the experience that we would have had like maybe 5 years ago, Darren, would have translated into a remote working environment. We were so tight.
We mentioned the word family, right? It felt like family. It was, you know, if you needed something, we'd help. You know, it was completely separate departments. From day one, I was told to make sure that if somebody leaves the business, they leave the business in a good light and actually more skilled than they were. So we were told that this is their salary now. They need to be trained and their salary should be here. If we can't meet that requirements, we help them find a new job. You know, it was literally like that. We're going to train them to the point where they're going to get better. hopefully they're better and the business has somewhere for them to fit. If they don't, that's our problem. That's not their problem. Congratulations. Let's shake hands. You did so well. We're so proud of you. It felt like that. It was just fantastic. I was there for 10 years. And I don't know many people stay at companies for 10 years these days. But I was.
Darren, have you taken that into Pager?
I'm trying to. Now, obviously, my co-founder of Pager is Kelly Robinson, who co-founded Broadbean. So I'm taking a lot of advice from him. I'll be honest, I think I got the culture wrong at Pager at the start, because we're a small startup, and because we're completely bootstrapped, we're very sales driven. So it meant that everything revolved around revenue at the start. So, and the way you're told, if you read the books, to incentivize salespeople is very different to the rest of the business. So it felt like our meetings were so driven around sales. All of our company meetings were around sales, and we seemed to celebrate with beer. Every time we did something, we celebrate with beer rather than just celebrate with a meal. And sometimes it's just a good thing, So I think actually I got the culture wrong at the start, and COVID was what actually made me realize that. So when you can't grab a beer to celebrate, what do you do? So there's lots of different things that have changed recently, for the better, miles for the better. Like you mentioned it, but going to remote, we've still got that tight unit now. But I mean, I haven't had a beer in 6 months with the team, and it feels really weird. But I got it wrong. And I hold my hands up to that. So if anyone's watching this from Pager,
Darren, was the rebrand the kind of like catalyst of that as well?
Yeah, I mean, the rebrand was a lot of things. It was the product changed a lot, so the product fit changed dramatically. I didn't like the name. So previously, Pager was called Content App. And you try saying that on a phone call, everybody thinks you're a continent. every time. I wish I could say it had a deeper meaning, than that. But no, the initial driver was I hated people saying, "Did you say continent?"
It's a good reason.
Lessons learned.
I'm so glad I didn't come and work for you, because it could have been a whole heap of pain.
Yeah.
So it was I think the rebrand gave us a chance to look inwards and say, what did we get wrong, and make sure we got everything right. So I've also, if we're coming onto the marketing side, we changed our entire marketing to be value led. Everything we do now online is purely value led. I don't think I've spoken about the product on LinkedIn for about a year. I haven't, but our inbound inquiries, referrals, all of those things have never been higher. So yeah, value led internally and externally. Making training aware, and stop leading when something good happens. It doesn't need to be grab a beer. That should not be the default thing.
It's weird, isn't it? Because in tech we have that. I mean, I've worked in tech for a very long time, so that's kind of the bro culture that unfortunately has plagued us for a long time. And it's also sometimes the lack of, well, I don't know, I'm going to be honest about it, the lack of diversity and inclusion in that. But of course, you can create those moments without realizing it. As you say yourself, Darren, that you can create by celebrating in the wrong way. Sometimes you can create something completely different without even knowing you're doing it, and completely, not inoffensively, ironically enough, quite offensively, but without you knowing it. It's a little bit. There's a great term, and a feminist friend of mine that was telling me this term, and I've completely forgotten it because I'm drunk. But it's a really good point. You think you can be doing the right thing and with great intentions, but actually you're actually making things worse without realizing it. You've got to be very conscious of not creating that kind of culture, which actually makes diversity and inclusion really almost impossible from the get-go. People don't want to work for those kind of places because they feel instantly, and this is what I love about, I was talking this morning about remote work, and it giving the world an opportunity actually to become better, to build back better, and actually build back our company cultures better, because it's not about let's all meet in the city centre and get drunk in Manchester on a Friday afternoon anymore. And hopefully that we kind of keep that lesson, and we don't create companies where that feels like it has to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And my wife's much happier with me since I stopped drinking so much as well. So it's all good.
I mean, the drinking culture has a thread through everything. I mean, the recruitment, when I started in a recruitment agency, that was it. It was actually, if you don't go to work and have a drink after work, you're not going to get anywhere in the company. Yeah, that was delivered by the directors. I mean, that was back in the mid-90s, so way before lots of things, a long time ago, Dan. So I'm really old. But yeah, that whole drinking culture and pushing people into things, ringing bells, and the way of doing this, and a lot in the recruitment agencies, it's still that way. A lot of agencies still have that kind of culture as well, even now.
It still goes on. Everyone has beer tests to test
Yeah.
what candidates can come into the company and what candidates can't come into the company, which is
horrible.
just, I mean, at best it's stupid. At worst, it's discriminatory, it's elitist, it's biased. Like, it's the stupidest way to hire people, is to see whether or not you go for a beer with them. Like, the amount of people we've just, as Jim said earlier, we've just launched a branding agency 4 weeks ago, in the middle of a pandemic, of course. Who thinks that's a great idea? Me. And the amount of clients we've actually had to turn away because we've gone into these discovery calls with them and said, what is your hiring? We're branding people. We're not a recruitment agency, but what are your values currently? What is your hiring process? What is your onboarding process? And we've turned people away because of the way they hire. I don't want to align my business with companies that are hiring people based on whether or not they will go for a beer with them after work. That's not the kind of client I want. So, aside from an employer branding perspective, the way you operate your business will impact you from a supplier perspective or impact you from a customer perspective. For me, brand is employer brand, company brand, and employee brand. So unless all three of those things are linked up, you're losing.
Yeah, you can have all the values you want on a wall, but at the end of the day, it's actually how you act as well. So you can say, there's a great stat. We do this stuff with Bob, but there's a great stat that integrity is the brand values and the employee values of 50% of the FTSE 500. Because integrity, you can't hope that a business would be have integrity, because it's going to hold your money and you're going to give them cash. So you kind of hope they have integrity.
Wasn't that from Enron?
I say this often to clients. I'm like, I'm sure there's a direct correlation between those that have company values.
The fact you have to say you've got integrity.
Don't have them.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact you have to put it on the wall kind of says you most probably don't have it.
It's a reminder that you should be a good human. It probably shouldn't be a value.
I tell you, we get on.
Speaking of Nate's question as well around okay, if top leadership doesn't get it, are you screwed, right? Is there any way to cultivate that culture very much bottom up if it's just non-existent at the top? And in my opinion, I would say, and in my experience, I'd say that if it's totally non-existent at the top, then yeah, you can only get so far, kind of going bottom up. But I do think if you have somebody who comes in I don't know if it was Jim or Darren who was saying people who naturally get it, who are just people. If you have somebody at the executive level who comes in and maybe they have a heavy sales background, or maybe they come from the financial services industry, which in the US isn't known for its hugs and hand-holding, it can be taught, and you can figure out, oh, okay, I know this is a weakness of mine. As an executive, I need to develop this. And so you do have companies that do regular surveys of their workforce. They hold listening sessions. Now, again, those can be done well and they can be done poorly. And the ones who just survey but do nothing, the ones who survey and don't take a critical look at their organization aren't going to learn from it. But I think it's if at the executive level they don't get it and they're not willing to learn and they're just looking at revenue, I would say it's about impossible, in my opinion, Nate. I do think you need some glimmers of hope, or you need a new executive chain.
Or you need the CMO at that board level with an absolute agenda. And I walked into companies and had those conversations on the way in. And the reason why I've taken the role is because that has been the will of a number of people on the board. And it does transform a business when you can come in with fresh ideas, and when a board is actually recognizing that they've got a massive weakness and that their entire future does actually kind of hinge on recognizing and fixing a problem. Because it's not just about branding, marketing, market value. And if you take all of the great there's so many really brilliant illustrations of how brand affects bottom line so intrinsically right now. Obviously, we're in this massive kind of almost workforce kind of paradigm. I kind of feel like, actually every employee has an option to vote with their feet right now. If they don't feel like they're being treated right, they've got a voice. And no matter where they are in an organization structure, they've got that kind of command. They can absolutely change not just their career, but the organizational's route. And I think if you can kind of be really bold, but be honest and kind of almost say, actually, you know what, we probably don't have all of the answers right now, but if we can work together and we can blueprint a route to what our absolute goals are based on our integrity, if it's not on the wall, like the integrity of the people in the room, the ambition of the people who run the business, and the view that actually being a human business means more than just kind of paying people on time at the end of the month. It's got to be something that drives all the way through. And culture isn't just something that you can kind of, like you say, almost like sort of stickers on the wall, or make sure that you've got a welcome handbook. Culture is, how does it feel to be included? Or does it actually feel like a family? Or am I making this shit up? Because we all know that families are great, because you also have the good times, but you also have quite a lot of the bad times. I don't know about you lot, but my family is like a proper Jerry Springer show. And it's beautiful, but awful every day of the week.
The mindset thing is else stuff. It's not always the way. I think there's another thing to think about. You guys are most probably a lot have worked for much bigger businesses than we do, but we work with Flock. We work for some quite large ones too, and it depends on the size of the business. You know, I'm based in Manchester and in Media City, and Manchester is really good at creating digital agencies. We're very good at that, and they tend to grow to a certain size, and then they tend to stop. And I know a lot of the owners personally, and it tends to be that they stop growing because they don't want it to grow anymore, because they love the family feel of it. So, you know, it gets to like 20 or 30 people, and that's okay. And they don't realize it, but they hamstring their own development side of it, because their egos get in the way. They start having to employ people they don't necessarily like in some respects, and so they're like, oh no, they're not kind of our people. And of course that creates a horrible toxic masculine toxic culture, and it destroys the businesses. And this is why lots of these companies churn quite quickly, and they don't last for more than 10 years or 5 years or 10 years. And so I think it depends on your sector, also how big it is. Like what we've noticed working with Flock, because what we do is we ask everyone around their values and do surveys, and then that is definitely a ground up approach. We notice, and I don't know if it echoes with anyone else's feelings here, but we notice a very sticky middle, where actually the middle management are the people that don't want the company to change very much, because they tend to have certain places and jobs and certain emotions around that moment, and they tend to think change is a bad thing. Now change has now happened to them, so a lot of these office managers and other people they're having to change because COVID, and they're the people that at the moment are panicking and going, everyone get back to work, everyone get back to where I can see you, everyone. And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry, but that was wrong 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, but now it's absurd. You know, you cannot be micromanaging people now, because it's a horrible thing to do anyway, but to try to do that now, I'll talk about the people who are looking at how many people are typing on their keys and stuff. You know, there's this software you can get that sees how many people are working at what times. Oh my God, I've heard so many horror stories of technology being used to crush people's souls during COVID rather than support them. But that was most probably a rant. Sorry, I just realised.
No, I would have to agree with that, Dan. It comes down to a depth of management, doesn't it? Like I think to go back to Nate's earlier question, yes, like it's quite tricky to change, you know, larger organizations' attitudes towards that candidate experience, the employee experience, the employer brand. But if there is a depth of management within an organization, it's much easier to do that, because instead of it being one kind of giant city, you've got lots of little mini tribes with their own mini cultures that add into the main culture. And I feel like when you have an organization like that, it's a lot easier to implement new ideas, new ways of doing things. But to kind of counteract what I've just said there, we have quite a strong rule within our business that we only work with businesses that are A, an ideal customer. So for us, that's someone that is open and willing to change, or B, they're under 50 heads, because we know we can have more of an impact within those smaller businesses than we could if we went for the bigger guys.
Yeah, well, and it's really important there to look at, you know, in terms of organizational changes, in terms of culture changes, if the highest paid opinion makers opt out, then it's not going to work. And, you know, there's millions of, you know, there's all sorts of things to back that up, because it's this belief that we can, and it's this challenge of our egos What if they're going to tell me the way I'm doing it is wrong and I have to pivot and I have to think about a new way? So it's that fear base of, oh, well, this is for them, this is not for me, which is then if you're saying, okay, how are we doing this together, and particularly unity during this time where we're going into a safety economy, when, you know, maybe you're not in gaming, maybe you're not in entertainment, and you're in a delivery type of service, you really have to get that unity is even more. So if you're opting out, then that mindset, everyone will see that. Well, they don't have to do it. If they don't have to do it, then why do I have to do it? So it becomes very inauthentic, and it becomes this piece of, oh, this is the wave of the day.
What you're saying there, Elizabeth, just makes me laugh, because I did some employee branding work. I won't say the name of the company quite recently, and the CEO didn't turn up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, thanks, dude. And it was a dude, of course. And I was like, oh, thanks, dude. That's, you know, 56, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, thanks very much for not being here. And the CFO wasn't there as well. So I was like, okay, now you've just told the whole story. My whole day now. By the way, I was charging them quite a lot of money, so it's fine. But, you know, my kind of, sorry,
you learned that lesson.
Lack of integrity.
Exceptionally good value there, aren't you? Remember that second bit of it. It's not lots. It's great investment.
Deciding to go back in and deliver to the FD and CEO separately.
Well, that I did it then. Bizarrely, thank you. But no, absolutely right. That's exactly what I did. I stayed down in Wales, and I actually made sure that I then grabbed some time with them. Actually, this is how sad I am. I actually spent another day, because they couldn't fit me in because obviously they were so busy, and I actually just kind of stalked them and then just did an hour with them both, because it was so important to me that they got this. Because otherwise, it was unfair on everyone else who was going to be forced to do this stuff. And but they still didn't get it at the end of it. They still didn't get, well, why is it so important you do this? And I was like, because if you are the boss and it trickles down, which you believe, by the way, I believe it trickles up, but that's fine. You need to be on side. And actually, that CEO, they actually then sold, about 4 months later, they sold the company, and that CEO moved on because of the culture change that happened underneath him. I'm not saying that that's my personality, and I was very happy. But, you know, I gave them a chance, man. I gave them a chance. I gave them an hour each free, and they still didn't do it. So. Yeah, don't hire me. I just tend to break companies. I just realized what I said. That's terrible.
Actually,
no, but there's
Oh no, go ahead, Liz. I was actually thinking, when you think of employer branding, right? What you hear about. So for those of you who watch Mad Men, or you know, any of the various TV shows out there, all of the media really talks about like ad agencies and more consumer branding. So you think of like, you know, brand A potato chip, or you know, that's or a certain hotel brand. In your opinions and your experiences, what is harder or easier about branding an employer versus branding a consumer good or a, you know, consumable, in your opinions?
My biggest challenge has always been there's never enough investment, ever. Like never designed to be, never considered to be. And to, I think, Amelia's point right at the beginning, I started out in, I came into recruitment marketing for an agency back in 2005, and I'd spent 10 years working in the legal sector before that, marketing B2B in the legal sector, and I thought that was really hard. All it was really boring, because everything takes so long and everything is in and you know, people debate shit all the time in legal, but in recruitment they can move a lot faster, but still it's almost like actually it moves so fast in recruitment. So if I talk about staffing for a second, when a staffing agency wants marketing or branding, they absolutely don't want marketing or branding. All they want is a faster promise and a bigger paycheck. That's all they want. And so you've never got that kind of consideration for what does it take to convince someone to bring a better relationship. And because I kind of come from relationship marketing, so B2B to B2C, I never really considered a career in B2C. I did 400 years ago. I'm kind of probably as old as Dan. I did this whole sort of idea of database marketing, CRM sort of driven accountability. Knowing the person that I wanted to talk to and build a relationship with became my kind of almost ambition. And very early on, I was up to my knees in databases and things like that. I was very techie and very geeky. But at the same time, the whole principle of relationship development kind of managed to manifest itself through my career. And so I think that the hardest thing still, and I'm not saying that my current situation at all, I've got a beautiful team, a brilliant budget, and I've kind of got everybody working with me, and we're totally in tune with what's needed, because we're also really confident in the knowledge of knowing what's needed in our clients at the same time. So it's almost like I said right at the beginning, I'm having the best Christmases because for once I'm in an organization that can see the investment needed, and not just in terms of cash, but in terms of time, consideration, strategy, it's creativity, it's all things that we're doing. And actually we're also in a unique position where we're actually following our own formulas and our own kind of theories and actually applying them to ourselves and taking a really long, hard look in the mirror and being okay with what we see, and also fixing the gaps as well. So kind of back to the point earlier on, it's really important that if you've got a senior team, that they may not get all of it, but they need to be open-minded to figure out what's possible. And yeah, I think being able to kind of see just basically the investment level, because no matter what we do, and I've been doing this now for 20 odd years, 23 years in B2B markets, no matter where I go, I always kind of have this almost like, well, you can have our attention, but you can't necessarily have a budget unless you can totally prove that you can drive revenue. And I can totally prove that I can drive revenue because I've been kind of working forever in this space trying to figure it out. But it's not like I'm going to be able to turn around and say, actually, you know what, we invested 100K and there's 3 million on the bottom line because I put 2 salespeople in. It'll be more like I put, 5 marketeers in there of all different series of lengths, 10 years and expertise. Actually, I'd like 10, but I'll settle for 5. And I can make you about 1 million. But if you give me another 2 or 3, I can hit you 3 million. And it's not an exact science. And I think that struggle between, I'm almost to Darren's point at the beginning, like it's a really innate, obvious business choice for organizations to hire sales first. It's still not in B2B, the world in which we hire marketeers first.
Yeah, marketeers are kind of like last in, first out. You know what I mean? Yeah. Us HR and training are first out. They're the ones always going to get the boot, pretty much. So we work directly. We work solely, pretty much, with recruitment agencies who just don't really even consider employer branding. The problem is, right, with these guys that we work with, is they're in quite a unique position in the fact that they are B2B and B2C, and then have to consider doing employer branding on top of that. So they get confused very quickly, basically, because they don't know, their heads are spinning at this point. It's like, all right, so we've got to get these guys over here, which is one tactic. There's those guys over there, which is another tactic. And there's these guys over here, well, we need something else kind of going on. And suddenly you pitch that to a recruitment business, no matter what size they are, they're just eyes roll back in their head because it's a lot to take on, because they're in this kind of quite strange position to having to do all this. And trying to sell that into them is, it takes a lot to say, look, yeah, exactly. Here you've got 3, you need, it's 3 strands of marketing, each unique to, and each solely pretty different to the other one. And this one's going to cost you this amount. This one's going to cost you this amount. This one's going to cost you this amount. But they will bring in this and this, just like Claire said. But that's a hard sell, I tell you. It's easier. It's easier when you're just, if you're just B2B or B2C, it's a much kind of straighter road opposed to when you're working with recruitment agencies. So kind of defending them slightly, you can see why they don't get it and they find it hard to kind of pick this up. And also that they see that they don't understand where the kind of value comes in this, because they've kind of got people like me coming at them from every angle going, you need to do this, this, and this. And they go, well, we don't really know.
I have to defend one of the agencies that I worked with when I first started out, actually back in 2006. The company that I was at was acquired by a really brilliant, forward-thinking, brand-orientated global staffing business. And they are continuously kind of sort of expanding and being brilliant. And the reason why I think, you know, they've continued such is because they did have that strategy of brand first, brand value. The CMO that I reported into back then was absolutely fixated by Accenture, and how Accenture had basically created its intra-brand value and translated the intra-brand value back onto the bottom line. So he taught me a lot about the economics of brand value way back then. And I've always tried to figure out, okay, so if the brand that I'm working for has a brand value, what would that be? And would it be higher than, you know, this, that, and the other, and other organizations? And I just think that that approach has probably enabled me to kind of come out of the agency and staffing world quite quickly, because realized to that extent, there's not that many, like to your point, James, there's literally a handful, if that, globally, of organizations that are purely staffing organizations that value their brand, just period. And then you kind of have to come out into other spaces, because as a marketeer or as a brand ambassador or as a brand manager, you just like, you get tired of smacking your head against a wall.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I so I'm going to name drop right a little bit here. So I used to work for, I hope no one's watching this, but I used to work for Randstad. Okay.
Nobody's watching, James, so don't worry. Nobody is watching.
And you said the Randstad word out loud.
All right, back off.
No one say Randstad again, for goodness sake.
I work for a Dutch company.
Actually, no, say it again, and then I can just pop them a little note and say we've been promoting them and they owe us some money. So do that.
Oh, good idea.
For the one viewer.
Not after what I'm about to say, they're not.
In which case, everything said is by James Whitlock. I'll pop his name and address, and you can send him the nasty notes.
Yeah, it's fine. I left them under terms. So the way it kind of will work as a business like that size is when you get to very senior levels of the marketing department, it's basically bean counters at that point. You know what I mean? Creativity, brand has all gone out of the window at that point. It's basically just down to, you know, we're sponsoring this racing team. What is the kind of like, what's the actual value? You know, where's the kind of numbers that we're kind of having this? How many people viewed this on Sky? And it really takes the fun out of it, you know, at that point. You know what I mean? It is absolutely just kind of the drudgery of the marketing world to be kind of at that point. And I would hate to be in that. You know, it's just like, it's horrible. Basically, it's just lifeless and soulless at that stage. So again, I think someone, I can't remember mentioned it earlier, but these businesses that are small, right, and they get to a size. And, you know, Thinking Circles is one of those businesses. You get so big and it's like, actually, this is quite comfortable. It's quite good doing this. And you still feel that you have some control over this. And it allows you as an owner and a marketeer to still get your hands dirty as well when you get bigger and bigger. And this is one of the pieces of advice I was always given when I started the business, is like, don't get too big, because what ends up happening, you're managing people constantly. Yeah. And what I found within something like Randstad is, you mean, you know, it's got how many hundreds, you know, how many thousands upon thousands of people working for it, and a marketing department at the top, about 4. And it was kind of, it was like, what the is this all about? You know, I mean, how does this even work? And how do you, like, again, if we go back to kind of like the employer brand and the brand values, how did 4 people trickle that down to a business of that size? It's just, yeah.
It also shows you how little importance they put on it. You can always tell, can't you, from an organisational chart, kind of how much, and the expenditure, how much do you really care about marketing? Is it really just advertising and project management, which it is? And these people normally have an agency. You're just project managing agencies. And I don't know. There's a really interesting way of I'm not going to say Randstad, because it's not really their fault, but I think there is a huge difference in the companies that will be coming next of how much money and investment they put into it. The amount of money they have put into their people now. I was talking to a recruitment friend of mine today, and I think he's absolutely right. And the big question they hear now is, what did your employee do during COVID? Not just what was their COVID response, you know, not just about what did they do, but actually what did they do for their employees, you know? And it's going to be huge. You know, I think someone said before, but I'm absolutely right. There's going to be a land grab. I don't necessarily. I'm a bit of a socialist, so I've got to be careful with words here, but I'm not a massive fan of the fact this next bit will be a land grab. because it will be a land grab, and it will be the most powerful that do it, because a lot of these big companies can hoover up the best talent, yeah, because they have really strong employee brands and they actually have something good and they've got lots of cash in the banks. I don't necessarily think that's necessarily going to be a good thing. I'm hoping that remote work allows us all now, this whole bit allows us to start being more diverse and more inclusive, and employee brand becomes more important. I'm really hoping that marketing becomes more important, and I think it will do. I think actually, I'm really hoping that things like green marketing and not just greenwashing. You know, we're talking about employee brand before, I know, but you know, greenwashing is another great example, or even, I hate to say Black Lives Matter and other stuff, but you know, these things actually are important to the next generation of people that you're going to want to employ in your company. They might not be important to the 60-year-old who started it, or the 50-year-old who's the CFO, but my God, it's important to the 22-year-old that you're going to be employing, whether you like it or not.
So I think that's a really good point, Dan. And to go back to what Ashley said earlier about, you know, is employer branding and consumer branding, you know, different or the same? I'm going to challenge James a little bit, because I am of the belief that at top line, yes, you know, B2C is different than B2B, and B2B is different than employer branding. But on a granular level, it's human to human. The reason why someone buys from you, whether that is, you know, wants to join your organization, wants to buy your product, or, you know, or your service, buy your service as a business, that decision is made by a human. So if you know your humans in each one of those pillars, the tactics are the same. You're just tailoring it to each individual one of those humans.
I wonder if
I agree to a certain extent, but I think the tactics do change. I think the tactics to if you want to bring on a client as opposed to trying to source candidates, I think there's a different approach. I don't disagree that, you know, your value of what you stand for doesn't ever change. You shouldn't be wanting to kind of change your values, but I think the approach changes. So I think we're kind of in agreement.
I think you might well be in agreement. Sorry, Nate.
Right, it's all good. I like how I raised my hand.
Oh, damn, you're in your hand. It's a really good point because you raised your hand. So I'm going to talk over you for a second. So one of the things we're doing here in our circle is every now and again, I've promised myself that when we're doing 2 hours solid, we'll just have a moment of pause. And it's about now, because actually I was going to do it at 8:30, because then you got this sort of second hour. It's a bit like an advert, except the only people we're promoting is our circle, because September's very busy for us. Do you see what we're doing there? So I tell you why it's busy, because we've got this to you, new lovely people here, and we'll carry on with this conversation in a second. On the 15th of September, Jim and I are on the main stage of the In-House Live event, which was going to be in London. Sadly can't be in London, which is a very sad thing, can't be in the real, but it's going to be virtual, and there's going to be lots of live activity for people watching, including me and Jim. We're going to be live. I can't say more than that. I mean, look at Jim's excitement already. I'm excited, he's excited, and we're both excited. But better than us being live during the day, we're also doing the after hours with them as well, which means we're going to bring a load of people together who are on the show, on the event, and talk to them about whatever we randomly think of at the time. We'll have to watch the whole thing, which is going to be awkward because there are about 70 speakers, I think, or something daft. On the 17th of September, we've got an Ask Me Anything in the morning. We're going to do a daytime one again, everybody. 10 in the morning, and it's about job hunting, and it's with the lovely Becky Webber from Tate, who has been helping off her own back, helping people to look for work, give them top tips, think about their brand, think about their flipping CV, and a bunch of other stuff. So we're going to do something with her. And on the 24th, in the evening for UK viewers or viewer, we'll be live at 11 o'clock at night UK time to support L&D Cares, which is looking at Elizabeth. Actually, why don't you describe it better than me, and I'll let Alex in. If you plug that, I'll let Alex in. There's a deal.
All right, I will pump that. So so me and Ash, we were talking about it. So we're having an L&D Cares Career Growth Summit, because one thing I hate is when people talk about something but not talk to something. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to bring for the area of learning, job seekers, recruiters, sourcers, other L&D folks, HR tech vendors, and professional organizations co-create around the question of how can we improve talent matching for the now of work and what's going on today, and then also think about, is it fit for purpose around how we do it? For example, sourcers. You guys always say we source for people for jobs, not jobs for people. Now, if we look how many people are getting furloughed, maybe there's an opportunity there. And on the third day, we're going to be co-creating, saying, hey, this is a cool mix of people. What could we do? We're not looking for a hack. We're not looking for a solution. we're looking at how can we crowdsource and create a better way forward. So if you guys want to, come.
But of course, that's along. It's all I'm going to say is for UK viewer, it's late. It might be past your bedtime. So put it out there. Just put it out for some of you. And in October, we've got a cunning plan for several different things which are going to happen. So we started this back in March, purely as, I guess, a means to an end to go and give people something to do during the day, because quite frankly, me and Jim needed the time to go and do something during the day. Going forward, we'll do more daytime stuff, but it's interesting to see what we do. But we've absolutely committed to doing lots more of this activity with lots of live video, because live seems to win the day. Having been involved in a few pre-recorded events recently, live wins the day, because you can ask questions and people give you an answer, and you just lose something in a pre-record. Let's plug over. Now, awkwardly, we had somebody in the waiting room who's been really, really patient. So patient, they're not there anymore, although their spirit is, if that makes sense. So I've let them in, but physically the video's not on, the sound's not on, but we'll see if they come back or not, which would be really cool. So I haven't talked across you. We've got 50 whole minutes of live whatever. Where do we want to go next?
So didn't Nate have a question?
Nate had a question, and Claire's got a question. So Nate first, and then Claire, you've got that question. You've got the question I know you've got in your back pocket.
It wasn't a question. I just was going to. The original question was employer brand, B2C differences, challenges with each, whatever. It makes me think. I mean, there's some big differences. I mean, one is like employer branding is marketing culture, which in and of itself is like a volatile, variable thing. Whereas like branding or marketing a product, you can be like pretty like objective or like detached. With like employer brand, it's like so attached to like what's going on inside the company. Whereas like we all know there's probably a number of products or services that we support where we either don't know what goes on inside that company, or we do and we still buy it because we just love it so much, or it's just super convenient. Yeah, I know, we all do it. But that said, I am fascinated or more interested in the way that B2C sells and markets and sells, and how employer brand can learn and kind of mirror that. B2C tends to be a lot less salesy than B2B. There's some B2C companies who don't even have sales teams at least not in the traditional sense. It's a lot more customer success heavy. It's a lot more brand drives the sale. And I've been thinking about this idea for like recruiting teams and even just companies in general. Like, what if you couldn't do outbound? What if outbound was not an option for you? Then what would you do? How would you sell? And like taking that approach is like a very B2C thing. I'm also with B2C has a tendency to push the creative limits when it comes to design and just creative, which I love the beauty of that. And I think there's just so much opportunity for employer brand to like watch them and learn from them to kind of level up. Yeah, Dan, did you have something you want to?
No, it was more. Are you not seeing that happening now? Because if you look at, I mean, sorry, not being silly about it, I'm a bit geeky. So you look at some of the kind of outliners, for example, Spotify, good outliner, yeah?
Yeah,
the
for
employee
sure.
brand of Spotify, insanely, it's a B2C play, yeah? You know,
yes.
They're empowering their own employees to become their influencer marketers. That's the reality of it, because that's what they do. But actually, shouldn't that be what your employees should be, your brand advocates, if you are a good company anyway? Like, I know people that work for Google only on the fact that other people talked about how great it was to work for that subsection of Google. So people who work for DeepMind, I'm sorry, it's a bit techie, but they work for each other because they don't have an employee brand, by the way, I don't think, in DeepMind. But they have a load of massively powerful geeks who just love each other and talk about, you should come here because you're a massively powerful geek. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a horrible thing from a diversity and inclusion moment. If you're not from Oxford and Cambridge, sorry, Demis, they say that. It's actually probably not true, but I'm sure they're trying not to do that. But it creates a bubble, yeah. But what they have done in a couple of, and I don't know what it's like in America, but certainly Spotify is a great example. They've empowered their own people to become marketers themselves. And that's technically what we've all got to do, isn't it? You know, just like in B2C, your best salesperson is a customer. That's the reality. The same here. And so I think that's happening now, Nate. Just it isn't happening a lot. I think it's fascinating to me, and I'm sorry because I kind of go across gambits on marketing, but what I feel really interesting is how LinkedIn isn't utilized as much as it should be as that kind of amplifying megaphone that has the potential for employee branding to kind of led through your kind of influencer marketing package from a B2C environment. People don't empower their employees to become brand advocates as much as they could do on LinkedIn. By the way, somebody who does is Gymshark, who does a very good job of that as well. So there are outliners, but yeah, I don't get how LinkedIn isn't being used more by employee branding. But
it's funny
and this is my point about human-centered.
Because Darren Pager is a tool that is for personal branding on LinkedIn.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
offended him yet to leave now. He's just gone.
Content at scale. But this is my point around human-centered brands, right? Is reaching people through that in those individual tribes. Like spreading an idea from within is much more powerful than spreading an idea from the top. And that's why things like LinkedIn is so powerful. My business is 100% inbound because of my personal brand on LinkedIn, and I would not have been able to achieve that if I didn't have a platform to share who I am, what I do, and touch humans on a human level. Don't get twisted. I'm working with big businesses, but I'm still reaching them on a human level because I'm putting myself out there and being an advocate for my own business. And that's something I'm going to translate through to my employees as well. Because I think if you're going to talk about brand and you're going to talk about marketing, you're going to talk about all this kind of stuff, like let's walk the walk that we talk. That's just my...
You've got to drink your own champagne. I'm talking about 5 years ago. In fact, I was paid by universities, about 7 years ago, to go around. I did a series of talks, and I came up with this concept which is called Brand Me PLC. And it's something that I've always believed in. So I was teaching these young people how to use LinkedIn, and that's 7 years ago, and how to use it properly and create personalized brands. And a lot of those people went on to be very successful, which is awesome because I may have helped, but also it's quite humbling because they're now on beaches and I'm not. So
yeah.
I'm of the firm belief that the future of branding is personal, and you only have to look at the likes of Gymshark to see that in B2C, like right in play.
There you go. See, I'm not that old. See, I knew about it before. I'm not that old. And it's personal branding, but lots of companies don't want it to happen. And this is my point. Yeah. So you get to a large company, you tell them, you say, empower your employees. Yeah, there's 100 of them. They should all become ambassadors for you. And they go, yeah, but if they become famous, they'll leave. That's literally their thought process.
No, totally not. If your employees become famous because of their subject matter expertise, they are more wedded to your organization than anybody that doesn't have a brand.
And let's all highlight the fact of how much an impact you can have on a business as a happy advocate leaver than a happy advocate employee. That's way more powerful than still within the business.
And I think too, there's also, we tend to be speaking of very traditional organizations, right? We also can't forget sort of, especially, it's especially prevalent in the US, are the franchise models that a lot of employers are going to, so that you still need that brand, but you don't own the asset. If you're McDonald's, you have this amazing brand and you have all of these units and all of this distribution, but you don't actually own or employ those employees. So how do you make sure and influence them in a way that doesn't get you into legal trouble, right? To espouse those strong values and to understand the brand and the product and to be able to recruit that solid talent for McDonald's, whether it's corporate or in the franchise world, but in a way that's kind of still gets down to all of those really big things. So I think also in traditional organizations where there's not a franchise issue, it's definitely easier to be able to sort of do that. But yeah, no, really interesting.
I'd say actually the only organizations that get that absolutely bang on is the organizations that think about experience, and they take it more, not even just candidate experience, they have employee experience, they have outliers, they have partners, they have offboarding experience, the experience kind of roller coaster, no matter what journey you've been on. Like 400 years ago, I started my first ever job in McDonald's, and it was a franchise, and I absolutely loved every minute of my 4.5 years tenure there through university and whatever else. But I worked at like 17 different branches. Like part of my whole kind of life is this change enablement, right? So if you if you have an experience that stays with you no matter what, whether that's personal, the amount of people that I talk to, the amount of people that I interact with, I don't mention McDonald's very often, much, unless I'm doing.
You're making me hungry for some fries.
Yeah, no, I'm just I don't
really
like
want to be
I'm still working for them.
Drive-through kind of experience, but at the same time, it's like it's the experience piece, right? So there are going to be organizations that we've all had experience of, either as consumers, as employees, or even just as fans, and we've got that experience and we talk. And this is kind of the world that we live in right now. We've got all the channels that can curate an opinion of an organization even before you even think about applying to work there or buy their goods. So we're in this human-to-human world where every experience, whether it's a synopsis that kind of goes like this, or it's a considered consumer kind of behavior thing, we all know that we're going to be influenced by experience. And it's not just ours, it's everybody else's.
The interesting thing from a B2B point of view, I think we've talked about the B2B before, is what B2B does, but sometimes kind of, maybe I'm not going to explain myself completely, but there's about 7 different people that are involved in the buying process from my company in the B2B experience, yeah? Now, each one of those is an individual. So we look at account-based management in a slightly different way. So we go, and I'm sorry, it's a cliche to say me to me, but literally we know we've got to talk to 7 people in a company of the size we want to work with. And we know kind of what the job titles are going to be. We know there's certain people that are like to be more idea champions, like the HR person, the operations director. But we know that isn't enough, because to talk to them is you just have an ideas champion, and then it tends to get knocked down by the CEO or other people. So we know as Flock that to get this thing involved and to get it done, we have to make it a SaaS product, which is a self-service model, and get it into the right people. And we know it's about 7 people per company. But actually, this is the fun thing that we've now finding is it's much bigger than that. It's not 7 people. They're the decision makers. It's actually 40 people you want to start using your product.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
The influence, the value. Yeah.
Exactly. And if Darren was still, I don't know if Darren still's on the call, but you talked about Broadbean. I'm a great fan. And by the way, I'm a great fan of Broadbean, even though I didn't really know what they did. I met somebody who worked for them about 10 years ago on a train, and I can still remember the conversation.
It wasn't me, was it? I'm sorry.
It was not. No, it was not. It was a gentleman, so it can't have been you. Unless, no, it wasn't you. I don't know who it was. But this chap, and I can still remember meeting him. I think it's called Darren Topper, but I'm not sure. I still remember because he was so excited about Broadbean, so excited. And I wasn't in the tech world and recruitment at all at that time. Not even slightly. I was doing an augmented reality company, and we were talking to LinkedIn, and we were pitching at the same time. And he was so excited by working for them. He was just an amazing advert. And I can still remember the name Broadbean now, even though no idea what they do. No disrespect to them at all. But
you need to know.
Oh, do I?
It's still ingrained. They were, and they still are, one of the largest multi-posting businesses in the world. But basically, they just get jobs in front of people.
They're like a massive jobs board.
No, they're the people that are at the epicenter of all of
the people behind the job board. You know.
Oh my goodness! It's the people in the dark sunglasses.
People
they make it easy.
People to job boards to anywhere basically. So
it's a bit like not knowing who Google is in search. Hello. I thought it's company called Google. I used to know Lycos. I'm not massively sure if that really makes sense. How embarrassing for me. But I can still remember. I can still remember how powerful and how excited he was for working for them. And I think it's that bit. I'm amazed to say people aren't empowering their employees enough. But I think a lot of the time, and I'm not being rude about it, a lot of people who work for large businesses might not be that excited about working for large businesses anymore. And maybe they're not, advocates for working for massive companies because massive companies don't necessarily light their fire. It's not about autonomy and mastery and purpose. The classic Daniel Pink stuff. Maybe they're not doing enough intrinsically. I don't want to get too deep, but it's later on. This is after 9 o'clock now. It's the watershed. Maybe they're not doing enough for them, almost spiritually, from a hierarchy of needs point of view. And that's why they're not advocates, because they don't talk about self-discovery, which is what Claire talked about. And that's why it's awesome. I'm considering maybe going to work for Claire. No, I'm not really. No,
that's a really good point, Dan. And I think that goes back to the depth of management, isn't it? Like if you've got a really deep management, you can actually really tap into individual motivators and manage people on a micro level and really understand what it is makes them get up in the morning. And that's what creates that, you know, the guys you meet on the train talking about how amazing Broadbean is because they've been individually motivated, touched, inspired to want to work for that business, and therefore talk to some random stranger on the train about how amazing that business is. It's understanding people's micro drivers and having the depth of management in order to be able to do that. Because let's be honest, big organizations can't do that at scale. You have to do that through a strong line of management.
He wasn't a sales guy. He was a CTO. He was a techie. He wasn't a sales guy. So it wasn't like.
It might have been Darren then.
You're on the line.
Yeah, it probably was Darren.
Oh, how ironic! That would be hilarious if it really was. That would be brilliant. That would be really fun.
But I think one of the points here is also then going back to what Nate was saying before about what is the stickiness of middle management. So I think there's this other piece, and this certainly in my experience in working with brand is this. How do we control the narrative if there's something that negative that gets posted, or if there's something that is where we can't justify it and we want to fight it back? So thinking about the compliance aspect of employee advocacy and being afraid to go into that space. And since people have perhaps been socialized and grown up in that, creating a very deep social media policy, etc. And so here, yes, please go on LinkedIn, but there being a lot of ambiguity as to, is this your own personal view and your own personal brand, or are you a brand representative? And companies being very conservative or very scared in terms of how do we need to approach that, because it is this aspect about legal compliance rather than saying, okay, what are our values around respect, different opinion? Do we really believe plurality of thought is something we want to embrace? Or do we have a constructive culture where we know how to deal with that? If someone's impassioned about something, that's actually quite good. You can actually use that and start from there. And so I think we can't ignore the stickiness of middle management and the socialization that people have had throughout the years as to what they can say and what they can't say. And so that's something we actually need to address in terms of what our values fit, culture added impact forward. Is that really considered? And that's why I think culture fit is such a horrible thing to have happened to recruiting in companies, because then we get groupthink, we get people afraid to say something outside of those lines and outside of those boxes, because it's that piece of, am I allowed to?
But that's the difference.
I'm going to dive into this because I actually help companies empower their employees' personal brands. That's part of what we do at Clout, is we go into business and look at how they're empowering people within the business to really promote the brands. My kind of general answer to that is, when we're speaking to clients, you know, speaking to CEOs, the business owners, the directors, is if you're worried about what your people are going to say, you haven't got a problem with your social media, you've got a problem with your people. You need to be hiring on values. And if you have a framework of values that people can operate within and say, guys, you go out and do your thing, but these are the values that you need to operate within, you really greatly reduce the risk of people, you know, tarnishing your brand. I mean, we can have a whole other discussion about culture fit. Like, how terrible is this thing where we go, right, we're going to hire all these people because they look, sound, feel, act like us. That, you know, that's a whole other live, I feel.
But also,
okay, we'll put that on the content.
All that kind of stuff. Like, culture fit is where, culture fit is where innovation dies. Like, that's it.
Yeah, it's like, that's how groupthink happens. But I mean, culture fit isn't the same, and I've got to be careful words, of course, but I think it's important that we all are. Culture fit is not the same as values fit. Yeah,
correct. So, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, values fit, culture add impact, moving us forward. Yeah.
And then also, but then I've got to be careful again. The values, because we get this, and it's my own fault, I'm not a sales guy, but with Flock, we get a lot of resistance to Flock and using technology to ascertain people's values, because people believe it means values like political values. Like, you know, are they a green person? Are they a nice person? Are they whatever? Now, we have 9 different differentiators, and some are autonomy and teamwork and caring. And this is how you get your Flock profile. And this is how you see if you should be working for that particular company, because you would not fit in, but you'd be a value add. And that's the difference, isn't it? It's about how do I add value to the values of this company and align together, because cultural mismatch is the problem, but not in the way that people think it. It's not the fact that that person has to be like me, but actually deep down, if you're not driven by the same values and motivators, then actually that does become a problem later on. There's and then there's a complete different side about when a company gets more than 180 people, but you all know the psychological thing about tribes becoming too big. And this is that's a different conversation about, you know, does it all break down, which is actually what Google does so brilliantly, because it doesn't allow business units to become bigger than 180 people. That's why Google's so successful.
But have you not just seen the news?
No, shit. Ooh, sorry.
It's okay. It's over 9 o'clock.
We're on YouTube. We're totally good.
Okay. Sorry, I knew I did.
This morning's newsletter, from my Human Times newsletter that I get, basically Google out of San Francisco have cleared a whole couple of 100 acres of land so that they can embrace the remote working, but they're building homes for their employees.
Oh, I love it.
With a view that actually they've then got the option to go into work, because they're building almost kind of like communities. Well,
do you like Cadbury's?
So we're going back to like the dream housing.
Port Sunlight in Liverpool.
Isn't this called the Truman Show?
Absolutely. You're not allowed to leave. Don't go over the bridge. Don't go over the bridge.
You walk up to the edge and go boom.
Stepford.
How many films do we know? How many scripts do we already know? And I think
bring in the strings. Bring in the strings. So
the scripts of organizations trying to do the best by their employees is absolutely the most important thing right now.
Yeah,
but you know,
and here's the question back to you guys: has employer branding gone from this is what we do for our employees to this is what we did during this time? Do you think that's what the switch is going to be, like post-COVID?
You kind of nailed almost the question that I had as well, Amelia, which is like, in some way, are we happy for the world that we're now in? Because we've got so much more control. We've got so much more of the dialogue as marketeers, and it's really important. We know how important it is working alongside HR, talent, and all of the organizational structure that is all about the people. Because if we don't figure out together collectively what's the right message, where are we going to go, how are we going to get there, who are we going to empower to deliver that, we're not going to have that much of a kind of diverse future, are we? Because we've got villages being built for employees to be closer to the organization, and they can bring their families. And they can
this is the land grab, man.
Well, and this is interesting. So I4CP just came out in July with their latest research on, what has really changed in organizations. And the first thing is organizational culture around caring. And I really seriously care about our employees, and that's come to the forefront. What's also changed is this piece around the real shift from hard to soft, in terms of, do you have managers, leaders who are actually really connected and understanding and see that, all of the juggling and creating a sort of code of conduct for work, life, and health. And then the third thing that they're noticing is that there's a lot of new emerging leaders in terms of how are they supporting others? How are they being socially competent in social isolation? And that these are really changing the foundations in which people want to work. And also in terms of how the succession planning has actually been deeply affected around these three major shifts in organizations.
The reason why I invested in Flock your Flock about 3 years ago, is for that very reason. I knew that I was not emotively or emotionally intelligent enough because my ego is the size of a planet. So I wasn't emotionally intelligent enough, and also other reasons, but anyway, I wasn't emotionally intelligent enough to make those calls. And so when I was looking for a piece of technology and actually started trying to build it 10 years ago, what Flock manages to do is it gives managers who aren't, and leaders, by the way, not managers, I think managers is the wrong word, but leaders who aren't necessarily emotionally intelligent enough to get it, they can get the data that they might need to be able to see a little bit deeper than they normally would. And it's really important during remote work as well, because you're not going to see these people. You might even hire them without never meeting them. And I had the joy of teaching a chap called Joel Guscon, who owns a company called Buffer, which is a social media app that people use. And Buffer's 180 people strong, and they only meet once a year, and they do a get together, and they meet once a year. They're all remote, and it's a massively successful company. But the new wave of companies, they'll either go two ways, Claire, I think, and it'll either go fully remote, and those who are big enough, however, will do the land grab, and they will create the Bourneville model, and it will be the Cadbury's model, and it will be back in day. Now you've got to remember, this is a song as old as the hills itself. the office needs a factory of manufacturers. That's where offices came from. Yeah, let's not kid ourselves. It was manufacturing based. People had to be here. Then you had the office. The office then happened, and now we think we're fucking stuck with this appendix, and that's just everyone thinks it's a good idea. Oh, it's good because of people can go in for office.
I thought the appendix was something that you had taken out.
I know exactly. I think you could take out the office. By the way, if you know about, and this is really weird, but microbiology, don't take out your appendix. It's not a very good call. It's actually really important. But it was just a metaphor.
It was just a metaphor.
Tip there, everybody, keep your appendix. Just to put that again, top tip, keep your appendix.
I was trying to do a metaphor.
Because Dan said so.
Random top tip.
Sodergren is in the house.
I should never try to be that clever, but the point was, we all understood appendices can be taken out. So the office itself can be taken out, and this is why we're finding that actually people are more productive remote working, even during a pandemic. 70% of us are saying we're more productive even for homeschooling, which is insane numbers really. And about 93% of people in the financial industry are saying they don't necessarily want to go back to the office. Now, that's horrible for a political and a government point of view, but that's a different point in time. What you'll find is these massive companies that are bigger than nation states and have more money than nation states, they will supply for their own people. And they will create these, the Apple complex will then become the university, will become the town, which will become the smart city, which is like what Google's been doing for quite a while anyway. Now, the question that I have, and it might be a bit deep for now, but it's past 9 o'clock, is this the future that we want? Because they will take the best talent, and they will take most of the money. I mean, look how much money Apple is now worth, and Google is now worth, and Facebook, and all these people. During the pandemic, they have increased their value by a tremendous amount. Will they? I think they'll put that money back in to their employee brand and employing the right people. I think they will build cities. I think they will build towns, and I think that is potentially. I know it sounds weird because I work in this industry, but it's potentially dangerous because it doesn't take very much more to start building walls.
Very insular.
Yeah, and a closed system.
Railroads.
Ready Player One.
Yeah, exactly. Ready Player One. I love it.
Dan, isn't that an episode of Black Mirror from last year?
Yeah.
Well, the irony is, I've never watched Black Mirror, and people say this to me all the time. They're like, Dan, is that? And I'm like, I've never actually watched it, which proves that I'm obviously a bit weird. I think I would refuse to watch it on that very basis that I might just get a bit too fucking weird. I'm weird anyway. It's already a bit weird. But it's really
You're going to watch it next year and go, I definitely said that on our circle. Ask me anything.
Exactly.
When
something comes up about a platypus and an appendix, we'll know.
If all you remember is platypus, flock, and appendix, I really have paused this up completely. I think
my icons are a thumbs up and a clap. I don't think it's going to work.
Has anyone read, just because we're now talking about things that people might have read, there's a great article that talks about the rich are now getting onto their, they're already doing this stuff. About 2 years ago, there's a great article. You have a look on LinkedIn. I'll send you all a link to if you've never seen it, but really clever article about how the very, very rich are buying up tracts of land in New Zealand and the very tech giants are doing all this. And this is absolutely true. That's what Bezos and other people actually were in New Zealand at the time. They bought out huge amounts of land in New Zealand already. And they had done for the last 10 years, Peter Thiel and other people. It's really fascinating to see that these tech companies tend to have this culture where they actually want this not to happen, not the bad things to happen, but they've been planning this for a very long time, that something big would happen, but they needed it to continue. And like politics would fall down, or, so they have their own generators. They have all this stuff already, by the way. And I know it sounds a bit dark, but we could get very quickly into the future where, you are literally cradle to grave. You work for Google, just like you used to for other people. You could literally have it where they have their own university. I mean, even in England, in Manchester, we've got UK Fast who want to build schools, and they want to have cradle to grave because they know they can't trust the government to create the right workforce for them. And that's a tiny company, but Google and other people, that's their plan, isn't it? They will need to own primary to university and then create their own workforces. And
isn't that?
And I think too, then you're letting them identify too, though. It's also still the closed system aspect. I mean, again, I'm going to have nightmares now, Dan. So thank you for this entire thing. I think
it's happening again.
You're allowing one company in a very specific sector to dictate the terms of what is talent, right? I come from a company where we tend to over-index on potential when we hire, as opposed to over-indexing on what school you came from or what certification you have, right? And we found that to be much more successful in terms of the success of both the individual and then in turn the success of our company as well. So I think that, yeah, it gets really scary. And I know when, not to bring them up again, but when Amazon was looking at their second headquarters, that's where a lot of the blowback came from. Because if you were not going to invest in the community, not just the workers, not just land buying, right, but actually invest in public transit and, you know, all these other supporting jobs, there was a lot of blowback from that. So I think it's a great, albeit frightening point. And I think also, you know, again, it closes off that conversation of what is high talent, what should we pay them? We're controlling a whole lot about these people's private lives. And what about the families that maybe live on the Google compound, but they're the spouse of a Googler? So how are they buying into that, right?
Well,
Sorry,
maybe these companies could pay their taxes, and then we wouldn't have to do this run around.
Yay! Elizabeth, you said it.
There's a book actually talking about the books that we should read, but I don't know if anybody. I'm trying to find it on my shelf. I don't know where my copy's
They're all
gone.
CDs,
Rebel
that's why they're
Talent.
not books.
No, because I've got a whole.
Those are the DVDs.
Like, look, there's like bookshelves up there, and there's like books and stuff, as well as pictures of my son, who is ridiculously growing up far too fast. No, there's a book called Rebel Talent, which came out a couple of years ago, and
That's
actually,
a great book.
gorgeous friend of ours, Matt Alder, did a really brilliant interview with the author, and it's a phenomenal book. And I actually got it before Matt did the interview, and one of the most amazing kind of almost like personal triumphs of mine was actually, I didn't come from a red brick university. I don't naturally speak like this because my mom and dad have really lovely broad Derbyshire accents. My dad's actually from Sheffield, one of the poorest places in Sheffield. And so I have a really ridiculous, like almost a two-face of my commercial persona and my personal persona. In fact, actually, no, I don't. Right now, at 44, I'm one and the same, and I have been for a number of years.
That's awesome.
The journey that I've come on from that, when I started out in London in my 20s, there's no way that I would have been as blatant as saying, I went to a poly that just turned into a university that year I turned up. Wasn't I lucky? But I also went to live in Rotterdam for a year, and I've traveled the world with the jobs that I've done, and I've had so many brilliant experiences. But the talent, or I suppose the value that I bring to any organization, and I suppose this is the same for all of us, but also everybody else that you either work with, come across, employ, manage, we've all got something to add. And if we don't just stop and kind of think about that for a minute, like the power is in the decision making, right? So every single one of us, whether we know it or not, has the power to empower someone else to add some value. And it starts at the conversation that you have in the next minute, the next hour, the next day, with people above and below you in whatever hierarchy you operate in or recognize. And I think communal living works for those people who really want to be part of a community. Organizations that have got massive hierarchies, like I've never really been a massive fan of the giant kind of global organizations where I possibly unnaturally assume that there's like, I'm just going to be a number. I need to matter, and if I don't feel like I matter, I kind of kick up a bit of a stink. I make myself a little bit known for all the wrong reasons, but in a positive way, like Rebel Talent would. But also as well, it's like you've all got something to add, because otherwise, why would you get out of bed in the morning? Like, what motivates you? Ultimately, you will find, I'm a bit of a romantic, I suppose. It's that whole kind of like, you'll find the love of your life. And I think you'll find the love of the job of your life. And no matter what it takes you, you do it.
They would have loved you at Randstad, I tell you.
Ouch, that's unfair. Claire's lovely.
I was actually talking about Randstad.
That's a power anti-employee brand.
So they do owe us money now then, because you've been nice to them and balanced them off. So that's the thing. They owe us money. It's a positive thing. I would say if anybody's out there listening who works for Broadbean, come and give us a call, because, well, I don't know. I think you owe us some money because we've been lovely about you, because everybody loves you. Even Darren before he left loved you immensely. So I'm conscious of the time. This is where I segue back in and proving that I'm still alive and well. It's 9:15. You got 15 minutes. 15 minutes to change the world, to create a new world order. Jacob, hello. And where are we going to go with this? I don't know what I've got a million questions written down, but none of them seem deep enough now.
I've got one.
Go for it.
Okay, this started in my original thread, and I get it. And James' point earlier on about recruitment agencies not getting branding, marketing, and the 3 strands that you have, I think it's just crazy, because recruitment agencies are people. You know, they're the people business. They should invest in more technology. They should invest in more marketing. It's a no-brainer. But when we talk about branding, we talk about marketing, we talk about EVP, we talk about everything at the moment. Where does that sit in this current moment? And is it a moment? And this is what I'm saying, where you've got places like Bristol that have had 203% more applications per job. So if we look back in recruitment areas that the marketing is to attract, and that's what we're trying to do, attract the right talent to our business, and you're stood there as the recruiter now, no matter what your brand is, you know, you put a job up, you get lots of applications. They might not be the right applications, but you're getting lots of applications. So what are your thoughts on all that at the moment? Is it a blip? Is it as important? Is it more important now? Because in the long term, will it change? You tell me. I'm throwing that out just to people's thoughts at the moment.
Give me a minute.
Jim, you asked a question.
That's Dan. Dan's not
great.
responded. Yeah.
No. I'm happy. I think you said a little bit, but if I answer it now, it might be silly, because what I'll say, I don't think anyone's really going to like, and so I didn't want to say anything. Because
other people will hold that thought, Dan. Then let's come back to that. So let's go around everyone there is. Nate, what do you think? I'm going to pick on Nate because Nate's got his mute on there, so I'm just going to ask Nate, and we're going to go round everyone. And let's in the last 15 minutes have everyone to answer this question.
My Zoom etiquette is top notch.
You're very nice. I'm going to say, yeah, I will send you a reward for being the nicest person. You do put your hand up, whereas everybody else goes, no. It just demonstrates what a lovely person you are.
I think that's got a direct correlation between the fact that it's noon and he's drinking coffee and we're all drinking Aperol.
There is that. Yes, I will say that.
I was going to say I think I'm the only one on the call who's not drinking right now, so it does help. Okay, so there is in the US, there's a big problem right now, and that is I'm just going to say, I think companies in general, I just have the most visibility into tech companies. They're receiving so much inbound that their recruiting teams don't even service their inbound anymore. I've talked to enough heads of talent over the last couple months who have just repeatedly said, we don't pay attention to inbound because we cannot handle the volume. We only pay attention to outbound sourcing and referrals. And that's a really, really big problem. I think that's a much bigger problem right now than employer branding. And I think like fundamentally at these companies, something has to change at the recruiting level. These recruiters are overwhelmed, they're overworked, they have massive goals. These companies are scaling faster than they can keep up with. Doubling, tripling headcount every year, raising tons and tons of money. Like none of it makes any sense. And what it's doing is it's just like, it's damaging the candidate experience, and it's neglecting really, really smart people who need jobs and who want a chance. And at the same time, they're screaming, we care about diversity from the top of their lungs, but their behaviors don't match that whatsoever, because it's impossible to hire for diversity when you're only focusing on 2 channels like that. And so as much as I like to talk about employer branding, I just look at these like fundamental issues inside of companies that just like really have to change. I wish I had a solution for it. But I think recruiters are the ones who are like really, really struggling. They're lacking fulfillment. They're lacking happiness. They're burning out, and they know they're not doing the things that they want to be doing. And so I know, like Claire, like Brian, with like attractive
other books are available, although just saying.
To what?
No, just saying that, Claire, there are other books available. Yeah, there is obviously that particular book, but there are other books.
I just like.
I'm just offering support to Nate because I know that there's love there, and also the philosophy of of what we talk about is really important right now.
It is. And I think like from a branding standpoint, that's really what's needed. Like we have to figure out a way to lower volume. We just have to lower, like volume it's not a recruiter's friend. I mean, it just like, it does way more harm than good right now. So
yeah.
Isn't that going to get worse though? I mean, so yeah, again, depending on where you are in the world, you know, we've got in the UK, we've not hit our wave of unemployment. We've still got a lot of furloughed people. They'll be coming back to work or not. So next month we'll really start to be really telling when we see what's actually happening. So organizations are swamped with people because they're just desperate to work. So I do wonder about, I absolutely get the volume thing, but I also think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I don't think organizations are ready for it or even know where to go with that. There are solutions, you know, you have to spend a bit of money and throw either some tech or people at it, but.
No, I almost disagree with you.
Okay. Good. Finally, thank God for that. Yeah, it's 20 past 9. Last, somebody disagrees with me.
Love is gone. Claire's talking about the love in the room, and then it just goes completely.
That's because I started to speak.
I can switch like this. I'm a total channel, but I totally agree with Nate. Like there is that opportunity right now for organisations to kind of like take a step back, but they can't do it for long, right? They have to kind of almost. It's just taking a breath, and the talk tracks that we've got going on at the moment aren't about kind of like changing the world or the lens of employer branding. It's actually about how honest are you being about the job or the company that you are actually recruiting for. And if we can empower almost the people to do the recruiting in a better way by being completely brutally honest, like this is absolutely the reality, you know, like if I look at my own journey, even into PH, I've known PH for a very long time. I was a client of theirs way back when I was at Broadbean. But at the same time, I've known Brian and Dave for a very long time. Their brutal honesty in my kind of like 6 interview kind of process that I had to go through, even though they knew me, was about the fact that actually this is like possibly the hardest job I've ever done. And I'll testify to that. It is the hardest, but it's the most absolutely rewarding because the hours and the thought and the consciousness is always on and you get absolutely hooked. It's like an adrenaline rush. But actually, if we can get to a point where the recruiters are able to be as brutally honest with their employer brand that they're attracting for a certain type of talent when they need the certain type of talent, and they can turn around and say naturally, organically, and also personally to all of the applications that are flooding in any given time, we've got your application, we're doing our best, we've got machines that are sifting through the words that you've got in your CV, but these are the things that we really need right now. Like, wouldn't that be a better experience for everybody? Wouldn't that be something, if you had applied to one of the scaling brilliant startup businesses that you want to belong to, like, wouldn't that be just better? Like, couldn't we just, you know, use technology?
I'd have to say, yeah, you need to solve the problem. We need to throw talent, or you either throw technology or money at it. So I did.
Why can't we throw both? Why can't we throw education and technology at the same problem, which is right now, we're in this space right now. These organizations that are scaling are killing their recruiters because they have basically put them in a total fail situation. Like,
okay,
we've had 6 months of COVID just here in the UK. Other parts of the world have had it for longer. Like, we should be able to create a better way to work that is for the longer term. Even for the mid to short term, it's got to feel better for the people who are on the front line. And I'm not just talking about, obviously, the really, really important people who are on medical front lines, but our recruiters are on the front line. Like, talent acquisition is on the front line. Employer branding is on the front line. Give them the honesty, give them the story, give them the tools in which they need to go and inform all of the other people who want and need jobs right now.
And then do you think the answer to that is removing ambiguity from job specs? Like, for example, when you say, like, we need X amount of years of experience, because you can't be asked to put what actually specific skills you need for a job.
Be brutal, be honest, be truthful.
Well, I think also you need different metrics. Like, we need to be, even if to Nate's point, employer branding is taking a backseat or like just not going to be the main focus in the immediate term. I think looking at how we measure success in terms of recruitment.
Oh,
no,
that's the first time it's properly happened. You know, it's not bad for what
It broke.
it broke. It definitely broke a
Over
hair.
2 hours. That's pretty impressive.
Not bad. That's not bad. That's actually an
I think
all-time
the
record.
thing where Ashley was going was really important though. Like the metrics part is important, but it's not the be all and end all. And I think it's almost like we haven't got time to stop and wait to measure success. It's like we haven't got time to wait for marketing to come back with a return on investment, right? We just need that gut feel. Like we need to get back to the gut feel, right?
Well, this is why I was going to say the bit that I was before. So if Ashley's come online again, I'll let her go first. But again, that might be just an inherent sexism. There you go. That proves the point, isn't it? Before saying for being inclusive. She's back.
You're back, Ashley. Sorry, we didn't get any of that, Ashley. Oh no, she's gone. That's completely.
I was welcome also Lindsey, because Lindsey's been here so long. Hi, Lindsey.
My apologies.
So Ash, you're on mute.
That's a really good freeze frame. Can someone take a picture of that?
Oh, I can't see the
whole.
I can't see everyone together.
Hall of Fame.
Awesome. At least it's an awesome photo of her. I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of passion in that picture.
Yeah.
No, I can't see everyone together. Well, it's bizarre because I was about to say I'd say the opposite to everyone, but actually I think I'm going to say similar because I think it is about technology. I think what we're trying to do at the moment is it's a bit like trying to open a laundrette and say there's lots of shirts to be washed and going down to the river and washing them yourself. And I don't think that's actually a good way to do it. And I think you could say, yeah, no, but we've always washed it in the river. Well, that's cool, and I get it, but that might not be the best thing right now. And I know there's a lot of problems with algorithms and AI, but that's because the systems aren't correct yet. But that doesn't mean you get rid of the idea of machine learning, because machine learning is how you get out of this, by the way. The way that recruitment gets out of this is the very thing it fears. Yeah, just like the accountant fearing Excel, it's the same principle. It will not get rid of recruiters. I was talking to another recruiter this morning about this. AI and machine learning and things like Flock and other technologies are there to empower you to do great things. It's to get rid of 90% of the churn stuff that you do not want to do because it's impossible to do. The amount of data you now have is impossible to deal with. Now, don't get me wrong, you could then argue, but what if the algorithm's wrong? Totally, yeah. But the idea of the company is the algorithm isn't wrong and you tune it over time. That's what machine learning is, and it becomes this thing. Now, this is the future of recruitment. The future of recruitment is talking individually to maybe 10 people instead of trying to talk to 1,000.
Yeah.
That's my guess, yeah? But it has to be so nuanced that you are not involved in the process. Just like you don't care that you didn't do the sums in Excel, because who the heck does? You don't go, oh, but it's Excel, it's taking me out my right to be a mathematician. Shut up, don't be silly, this is ridiculous. Same principle here though, but we are brand new to this. And I think what's going to happen next is the companies, and I just said this morning on another podcast, recruitment companies who don't right now have someone working in data science and AI won't exist in 3 years. Because it's so important, because you have to have your own piece of technology, or you have to be rocking IBMs, or you have to have a technology stack. And by the way, you do. You cannot work in recruitment and just think your technology stack is a phone and LinkedIn and other stuff. It just isn't. We know this. But your technology stack is going to be absolutely key. Your CTO is going to be tremendously important. Okay, this is the same with marketing agencies, and I did a talk the other day for marketing agencies. Same principle though. Digital transformation now means that you can't just say we're embracing technology. You have to become masters of it and actually own it from an IP point of view. And that's why it's slightly unfashionable, because I'm saying you have to own your IP, and actually your brand value will actually be the IP of your AI system. And that kind of sometimes blows people's brains. They go, no. I'm like, no, that is now your employee brand. That is it, because there's no way of doing it another way. There's too much data now. And people don't like it because
hold that thought. I'm going to tell you to shut up, because we owe it to the viewer. No. We owe it to the viewer. We owe it to the poor viewer. He's late. He's sitting there with his cocoa. His name is probably Jacob. And he's sitting there with his cocoa and he's saying, oh, I thought this was over and done with at 9:30. And it is for the lovely viewer. What I will say to you, Dan, what you're trying to say, and Jim's going to smile at this, if only there was a bit of technology that could match all those applicant data that comes in with like the job description, if any it matched live and did like a million CVs in one go. If only there was a piece of technology that did that.
Screening questions at the start.
Jim, do you know anybody?
Questions. It's all about, and actually the conversation I had with Jacob, if he is listening, was all about screening questions and filtering at the start.
But anyway, on that bombshell, we're going to have to stop. So we're going to say goodnight to everybody. So as a reminder, we're back live again on the 15th and on the 17th and on the 24th. And we'll have something else lined up as well, which is around employer brand and coronavirus, and a survey of 1,100 applicants looking in the job market and seeing what they found was really important. A piece of work there, which is a big piece of document, which nobody reads. So we're going to do a webinar on that as well. So thank you very much to our guests. They're not going anywhere because they don't know it yet. If you are watching live, thank you for watching. If you're watching again, I hope you made it to this bit, because this was like the best bit. You probably could have cut the first 10 minutes and not missed anything. But anyway, your loss. Thank you and good night, everybody.